it became very clear that the way I had been living my life was no longer tenable. I got really, really sad, and I did not have any experience with dealing with grief at that level, body grief. I was so used to just being able to do whatever I wanted to do. It's one of the gifts of having a healthy, able body.
Hello, and welcome to the Big 4-0 podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie McLaughlin. In our 20s and 30s, we spend so much time and energy striving for success and checking all the boxes, but it's usually according to some outside authorities' standards or approval. Then, in the years around age 40, many of us start to redefine who we are, what success means, and what we want out of life. We learn to have more confidence in our own authority and experience, and our life adjusts accordingly. Or we ignore it all and deal with the repercussions of not evolving. It's not always a smooth process. I know I fought against the transition, which made getting through it a messier process than it had to be. On this podcast, I welcome you to tap into my stories and experience, as well as those of my guests, to help you make your way through your own transition, and maybe even avoid some of the mistakes we made along the way. Today, my guest is Anna Brooke, who is a writer, healing arts practitioner, and former burlesque performer known on stage as the Reverend Legs Malone. Her journey from anxious overachiever to joy-fueled performer is a powerful story of self-trust, reinvention, and resilience. Hi, Anna. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm so glad to be here.
I am so thrilled to have you here. We had our introductory chat a couple of weeks ago, and it's just safe to say that I fell in love with you and you're my new best friend. So let's just start there.
The feeling is mutual, FYI.
And as we'll see through the story, there we have so much in common and so many commonalities in our story. It's actually quite silly. So that is so much fun. This is one of the reasons I love doing this podcast so much, is because I get to meet people that I don't necessarily come across on a day-to-day basis or in my normal life. And I get to I feel like I have friends all over the world now.
I love that.
Although there is a very good chance that I could have run across you up in southern Maine during the summer, because you do some shows up there. And we drive through Ogunquit on our way to Kennebunk. So it's possible that we could have met in real life. Let's start by going back to the beginning and tell me a little bit about who you were when our story begins and how you became that person. What were the forces that shaped you?
That's such a good question. So in my 30s, that is kind of where this story begins. My whole life, I have struggled with doing what I want to do versus doing what other people tell me to do. Or I want to go work on my own, but actually, no, you need the security of a day job. Or, yeah, sure, the arts are great, but you need a real job. And it was like this constant duality that I had a very hard time finding a happy medium in between. And so I went to graduate school. My background's in art.
Before you go there,
Yeah.
that was something you consciously felt as a young person?
I couldn't put words to it, but I felt it.
You did feel it.
Literally feel it in my body. Like my heart would feel heavier, my gut would feel heavier. I'd sometimes literally feel like my body was trying to move in two directions at once. Between my shoulders and my chest and even my hips, sort of simultaneous, freezing up and wanting to run for the hills. And I didn't have the language back then, or really the headspace to understand, really the education, I guess, to understand what was happening. I just knew when I felt uncomfortable that was unfortunately a very common reality for me. I felt uncomfortable a lot.
Do you know when was the first time you can remember that? Was it teens? Was it 20s? Do you know how far back? Or
way back? I'm talking early childhood.
Okay.
Always, I always had an edge of anxiousness to me. And I think it was rooted in never having been shown that I was enough as I was. It's not that, my parents did a beautiful job. I love my parents. We have a great relationship. I'm very grateful to them. It was also the 80s.
Yes.
It was a different time. And I've always been extraordinarily sensitive to my environment, to others. And there was just a sense of who I was. I needed to be focusing all of my energy and attention on being something that I wasn't, because who I was not enough.
Right. Because in the 80s, we all had to do everything. We all
Yeah,
had to achieve. We all had to be the best we could be. We had these obligations to achieve and just keep going and pushing and more, right? The
absolutely.
80s were the greed decade. And so
Yeah,
it went beyond money to achievement and things like that. So I understand what you're saying. And it's interesting because I might not have given it that same language, but you're right. We were always pushed
yeah.
to achieve more, to do more, to get better grades, to go play a sport, to do your extracurriculars, to all of those
Absolutely. I mean,
things.
and even from like the early on, I remember being like, "Oh, I have to go to college someday. What can
Yeah.
I do now to
Right.
make it look as good as possible?" It's like, why was I thinking about that at age 12? Like,
Right.
no.
Right. All right. So that's really, really fundamental to you for your whole first half of your life. So now you were about to say you went to grad school for
I went
art.
to graduate school and fell in love with the work. I was living in England at the time. I was able to get a job through my student visa, and I was so happy to be out of America too, to be perfectly honest. Like, I left the country because I didn't want to take the GRE. I do not enjoy standardized testing, and it was cheaper to go to school abroad. So I went and I started a life there, but I couldn't stay for a variety of reasons. The home office would not grant me a work visa because, again, working for the arts, even across the Atlantic, they said they denied my work visa because I would be working for slave wages and I would
Mm,
be too dependent on the system. And I was also, it's like, welcome to working in the arts. Like,
right. Right.
but throughout all of this, I knew something was really wrong. I mean, just personally, where I was working for this brilliant nonprofit, very small, run by a whole lot of heart, not a lot of money. And I bent over backwards for them for a variety of reasons. One, it was survival. I wanted to stay in the country. I also loved the work. It was event based, working with artists and galleries. And I was in my happy place 100%. Like, sure, I was eating like rolls for dinner, but it didn't matter. Like, after I was, basically told to leave the country, I moved back to America. I'm originally from New York City, and I had to move in with my dad and my two much younger half brothers. And it was like, wow, how old was I? I was 30, I was 30 something, early 30s. And it was just so clear that like I had messed up. Like that was the story that I was taking. I had
Yeah.
established a life. I was living in London. I was living my dream life. And it was ultimately unsustainable on a
Yeah.
variety of levels. And so for me, the one thing that has been constant with me, you asked about like how long has that anxiety been with me? The other thing that's always been with me is a very loud heart. And I'm not talking like ka-thump, ka-thump, ka-thump. I am somebody who follows my heart. When the alignment is there, it's like, oh, I'll be spontaneous and go do that thing because it lights up every cell of my body, which like shocks and horrifies my parents on a regular basis because they're both very pragmatic and very like, what are you talking about? What's your plan? And I was like, I don't have a plan. Whoopee, I'm going. And yeah, I definitely specialize occasionally in leaps of faith, shall we say.
Oh,
And I had come home. This is rewinding slightly.
yeah.
I'd come home prior to receiving the final rejection from my work visa, and I knew that something was off. I had no sense of who I was. I was really depressed. I was broke. And my mom lives in Western Massachusetts next to a beautiful well-being center, a yoga center. And I was like, I need to just go and like get clear for a weekend. I had enough money to like go to be a commuter for the weekend. And I found a workshop called Trust Your Vibes. And it was all about trusting your sixth sense. And I was like, all right, I don't know about that. I mean, like, sure, sixth sense, yeah, whatever. That sounds great. I can't do like advanced Iyengar. I can't do this. Fine, I'll do that. And that weekend changed my life. It was all
Mm,
about quieting the mind to be able to tune in and pay attention to that essential voice, our intuition. And on the very last day of that weekend workshop, the leader had us do a guided meditation that she was leading. It was rooted in ask yourself, what is your greatest joy? And it was in different sectors of our lives.
mhm.
And she said, just listen to your intuition. And one of the last rounds of questions she got to was about career. And she said, ask your higher self or your intuition or your sixth sense, what would bring you the greatest joy as a career? And never before and never since have I had what happened happen again, which was I heard a voice. I recognize I might sound a little crazy when I say that, but it was legit, like full body goosebump. What on earth did I just hear? And there was a voice in my ear that said burlesque dancer. And I did not know what that was. And I remember opening my eyes and turning to the side because I was convinced somebody was whispering in my ear. It was such a real feeling.
Yeah.
And I was just in shock. I was like, but it also had felt like I had just been hit by lightning. I couldn't make sense. I was super scattered. I'm like, what on earth is a burlesque dancer? Now, mind you, I have been a dancer in one way or another my whole life.
Okay.
Like Walgreens and the grocery store they are my favorite catwalks because a good song comes on, I will sashay down that cereal aisle like you have never seen.
I swear to God, Patrick and I, and again, this is just you and I connecting here. Patrick and I dance in the aisles of the grocery store, and we swear to God we are on the Christmas reel that they put up at the Christmas party of like the people doing crazy things in the grocery store. Because Pat and I will, good song comes on, and like, we literally will stop and dance.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for doing that. Like anytime anybody says yes to their heart and their joy and basically allows their spirit to be present, which happens through dancing, I just think the world gets better, even if just by a tiny click. Like when anybody says yes, it affects the whole grid. Like it affects the field. Like I can guarantee you, if somebody's having a bad day, walk through that supermarket and see your husband like grooving down in front of the soup, they'll be like, wow, that's and it'll take them out of their moment, be like, oh,
Yes.
like that's so funny. Like who knows what else is going on for them, but it's like just even in that moment, it's little moment of levity. Certainly now more than ever, like those moments, those pockets of joy are essential to not just our health, but also our longevity. And so rewinding to the story, I ended up going home after that to my mom's house and I immediately Googled, what is a burlesque dancer? And the sound my jaw made when it hit the desk was very loud because I could not believe my eyes. It was basically the art of the striptease. And I was somebody who had a really bad relationship with my body for my whole life. Rewinding back to, I have to be different from who I am. That was projected absolutely onto my body. The dieting, I unfortunately had an eating disorder, like never drinking water because I didn't want to gain weight. It's like, I wish I could go back in time and be like, honey bunny, drink water, just drink water. Just stretch your body, go for a walk, eat the burger. It's okay. Yeah. But I wasn't there at that time.
When we were kids, it was the era of the diet pill.
Yep. Absolutely.
High school. Everybody was popping diet pills in high school in the cafeteria. Yeah. They're freaking popping uppers.
Absolutely. I went to 8 years of all girls school. Like I can't even tell you how many dysfunctional, disordered ways of being were so common and commonplace, which looking back and I was like, holy moly, like, I have a lot of compassion for myself and everyone else because man, we were in it. And again, like the 80s and the 90s they were kind of like power decades. I don't want to make light of anything, but it was just a different time. And it's weird now to have so much have changed in such a short period of time. Mm-hmm. So basically, long story short, I became a burlesque dancer.
And this is one of my favorite parts of the story. And thus was born the Reverend Legs Malone.
C'est moi, the minister with the 34.5-inch inseam.
Oh my God.
I was initially just Legs Malone, and then I actually got ordained in 2017 to marry a friend through the Universal Life Church, give it up for ULC, and it opened up a next chapter for me. And so then that's when I started incorporating Reverend into my stage name. So I was the girl with the 34.5-inch inseam. I'm now the minister with a 34.5-inch inseam. Hashtag evolution.
Oh, I love that so much. Oh my God. I don't know why it strikes me the name is spectacular. Tell me how she was different than you.
She was confident. She had everything to share and nothing to lose. Wow. She was unapologetically outrageous and as beautiful as she wanted to be. And she belonged to herself. The thing I loved about getting on stage, and I've always been very comfortable on stage. In some ways, it was like a very natural step for me, even though it was like, this isn't nonprofit work. Like, what's going on? Like, does not compute. But it's like I woke up for the first time in my life. I think I even remember my father, who I love, who's a tough old nut. And he even said when I came home after I'd been dancing for a while, he said, you're calmer. He's like, you're calmer, you're less anxious, you just seem happier. Check and check. Yes, all of that. And I hadn't even realized it. But yeah, I mean, legs and still gives me a sort of beautiful veneer in a way. Like, and that's the thing I love about getting on stage. Like, what's happening outside the theater doors does not apply. Like, are we all in it? Absolutely. But especially now, as I'm still performing, but I'm doing more hosting than I am performing now. But even then, like, the host gets to set the container of the show. This brilliant woman named Kate Valentine, is a very famous MC named Miss Astrid. And she gave a brilliant keynote many years ago at a big burlesque conference and said, the host is the egg that keeps the cake together. It's not the flour, it's not the milk, it's not the sugar, it's not the icing, it's not the rosettes, but it is what keeps everything together. And so I don't take that lightly. In joy is on such I don't it doesn't make sense to me, but also I live in the woods and like hang out with like my wife and 3 animals all the time. So my perspective is a little skewed, I think. But it's like I don't see the normalization of joy anywhere.
Right.
I just don't. It's like I can see performative joy. I can see people who are taking delight in what they're doing, but like I want to see more. I want to see crazy colors. I want to see people dressing however they want to dress, even if it's like wearing like bobblehead, whatever, those little like alien antenna things, again, to the grocery store, that you can tell where I spend most of my time. But like just to give way to express ourselves, because I think self-expression is deeply connected to joy. And when we say yes to our heart, to what brings us delight and joy, everything changes. You might be living in the same house with the same job, with the same, but it's like a different filter gets dropped in. Just that lightness that comes in. And like and I think that's another big reason why so much of my work has been working with people with their relationships with their bodies, and also giving way to their own self-expression. Yeah. Because ultimately that was my journey. Like that's what I had to learn in order to be like a healthy, sane, now late 40s individual. But it was both like a very uncomfortable time because I had some real steep learning curves, but there was always a net to catch me. Yeah. And that was in the community that I had been so fortunate to be accepted in. I'm talking about specifically the neo-burlesque community in New York City. And, it's full of humans. No one's perfect. There's drama. It's hello, welcome to humans. Right. But we were all coming together by force of what was in our hearts. And I've never known a community to be like that before. And I feel exceptionally fortunate, not just to have been a part of it, but to have been welcomed in so quickly as kind of a relative newcomer. But I just went in like wide open eyes, wide open heart, just being like, I will do whatever you want me to do. I just want to be on stage with you guys. Yeah. And bit by bit, it suddenly happened.
Yeah. So you spent the better part of your 30s where your main endeavor was burlesque. Mm-hmm. But you're in New York City, and I'm guessing that doesn't pay a 6-figure income. No. So tell me about kind of the rest of your world. You had to probably do side hustle after side hustle, right?
Yes. Hustle was the word. I was working 7 days a week in different jobs. My focus was burlesque and working at night. So I did everything I could around it. So I was a bartender, a daytime bartender, which was a trip. I was an art model for many years. I temped. I did one-off gigs. Like whatever I could do to make rent, I was living dollar to dollar. I mean, hats off to anybody who says yes to a full-time career in the arts. Yeah. Please protect your adrenal glands. Because it's like, that was another tough thing. Cause I just kept going. I was like, I'm going to be a world famous burlesque dancer. I'm going to do this. And I started booking tours, and I got flown to Stockholm, and I went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival 2 years in a row. Like I was living my dream, but my body was also like, what are you doing to me? Yeah. And it was, and again, it was like hustle culture. And it was just like, okay, I got to keep going. And like everybody around me in the community was in the exact same boat. Right. We were all stressing about money. We were all like trying to find the cheapest place to buy really good food after the show because we were starving. It's amazing looking back on it now. It was so real and so in our faces. And there was also a kind of like, I don't know. It's a weird thing to say, but there was almost like a kind of pride that
Mhm.
came from some people being like, "Oh yeah, I can do this. Like, I'm only eating rice and beans, but you know what? I'm making it." And it's like, "Are
Right.
you?"
Right.
I mean, and no judgment, but like honestly, like human to human, are you doing what you love?
Right.
Or are you burning the candle at both ends to move towards a dream that may not be financially sustainable or really something that you can do in the long term?
Right.
And I literally bent over backwards. And so it's no surprise, spoiler alert, that I hurt my back.
Right. That's a very nice segue. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you
Bent
very
over
much.
backwards. Right. You were 39.
I was 39. Yeah.
How'd you hurt your back?
It was repetitive stress ultimately in high heels for 10 years does not do a body good,
Right. It's not
especially
like you
without
were just walking down the street in high
it wasn't no,
heels.
definitely not. I was go-go dancing. I was doing wild things on stage. I was, running up flights of stairs. Sometimes I was wearing heels, although after a while I was like, "Oh, this is the worst." No, like yay flats. But I needed and I wanted to look as good as possible all the time. And certainly when you're on stage, you can't wear flats unless you have like a really bad back injury. And people do it all the time. But it was just like, "No, this is what I do. Okay, my body hurts. So what?" But also I wasn't stretching. I wasn't eating well. I wasn't building strength in my body. I was just showing up with the bare minimum of what I had, get through whatever I could do to make money and to further my career.
Yeah.
And so I noticed one day I was sitting on my floor and I was going through, I'm a little bit of a pack rat. I used to be. I'm much better now, but I had all these old magazines and I had sat down on the floor, my legs straight out in front of me. The pile of magazines was on my left side, left of my hip, and I was picking them up and moving them over to the right side of my hip over and over and over again. And I was sort of like leaning over and pulling them over. And like after I got up, I was like, ooh, something feels really weird. And I hadn't felt that before. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll take care of myself. I remember like lying down on the floor and like rolling my knees around, and, like trying to like something was wrong with my sacrum, my low back. And about 5 days later, I was in a show. It was January 24th. It had just snowed about 2 feet in New York City. And I had my gig bag. It was a little bit of a stressful situation. It was a scripted show. I was one of the co-stars of it. We had not been able to rehearse it. And so I was showing up to the theater. I think the show was at like, I don't know, 8 o'clock. And I rolled up at like 2 so that
Mhm.
we could do a dress rehearsal. And I was playing the role of cat lawyer. This was Dog Cop 3, The Return of Cat Lawyer. Very serious work. And I had glued on, like, I had these lovely white gloves and I had glued on little black pointy nails. And I remember sitting on the edge of the stage, just making sure, like, I had pulled them out. I just finished gluing them. So I was like, okay, they can dry before the show. And I went to stand up and I couldn't stand up. And I started to panic. And I was just like, okay, not only am I co-starring in a show that I need to be moving and dancing and everything, I don't understand what's happening with my body right now. And I sort of whimpered my way through dress rehearsal. I remember lying on the stage with my legs straight up the wall and just like asking my back to cooperate with me. And finally, like it wasn't going away. And I remember sitting in the backstage and just saying a prayer and taking 4 Advil and a shot of whiskey. And I was just like, please get me through this show. And I barely made it through the show. And thank God my wife, we weren't married yet at the time, but she was there and she helped me into a cab afterwards. And everything changed that night. It took me about 3 weeks after that to be able to walk normally. What had happened was it wasn't a fully slipped disc, but I had several bulging discs and I'm very prone to inflammation, which I also did not. I was like, everybody's inflamed, whatever. It's like, yeah,
Right.
newsflash, girl. Like you can
Right.
you can calm it down by like being healthy.
Right.
And it triggered a back spasm, which in turn triggered a few more discs to get inflamed in my neck. And so it was just like it was like a domino game of worst case scenario for somebody who was working in high heels. And that was like my primary job. That was my primary source of income. It was
Yeah.
everything. And I had to cancel 3 weeks of shows. I, thank God, was able to like find a chiropractor. I was on Medicaid. So it's like he couldn't cover the fee, but I was able to find one in Brooklyn Heights for like $40 a visit. I was like, okay, I can afford that. And slowly but surely, like I started to be able to like move around and I wasn't in like excruciating pain. but it became very clear that the way I had been living my life was no longer tenable. I got depressed.
Yeah.
I got really, really sad. And I did not have any experience with dealing with grief at that level, kind of body grief. I was so used to just being able to do whatever I wanted to do. It's like one of the gifts of having a healthy, able body. It's just like,
Right.
I'm going to go run up that hill. Hey, look, I ran up a hill.
Yeah.
I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do that. And it was suddenly like, I don't think I can do that.
Yeah.
And so it really forced a reckoning. And so I had to shift how I was making my money. And I was already working in the healing arts. I had been working in the healing arts for a while, and basically put out a call like, hey guys, I need to shift gears a little bit if people want sessions or whatever it was. And so like people were coming. It definitely, again, was not sustainable. And I honestly don't remember like a lot of that. Like there was such a sort of like self-imposed blackout moment, because it's just like everything got real dark.
Yeah.
Like, and also it's like I had heard about people who had like chronic illness or like major injuries and how pain can change a person's personality. And I watched that happen to me, and it terrified me. I remember being on the couch and my now wife trying to help me. And it was like I had blinders on that sort of went into like pinhole camera style. Like all I was focusing on was how to avoid pain.
Yep.
And it blew open a side of my perspective in my mind that, yeah, it was a terrible, terrible time. But I also knew at the time, just as I know now, and I say to my clients all the time, like the only way out is through.
It is true.
Like, so I had to slow down. I had to heal. And honestly, that's the thing. Like slowing down
Yep.
was what it was, because I was so accustomed to like hyper revving and doing this and doing that. Oh, I gotta, yeah. And then, and I'm showing up for this gig and I look fabulous. And then I got to wake up the next morning because I have to be on an art model stand at 9 a.m. for a bunch of fashion people who don't even want to be in class, holding the exact same pose. And then this and then that. And I got to go bartend. I got to do blah, 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 blah. And I was like, no. This does not fly any longer.
Yeah.
And
It's unsustainable.
that was the beginning of the transition.
Yeah.
Hi, we'll get back to the conversation in just a minute. We are about halfway through this examination of midlife transition, but I want to take a quick pause to ask you something. Have you been feeling weirdly uncomfortable lately? Like your life technically works, but something just feels off? That fuzzy discomfort has a name. I call it the ick. It's one of the signals that you're entering this midlife transition. Not a crisis, but a shift. And it deserves your attention. I put together a free guide that breaks down what the ick actually is, why it shows up, and how to start making sense of it. So if you're in that in-between space, restless, questioning, wondering if there's more, this guide is probably for you. You can grab it at thebig40.com/ick. Spell out all the words, thebig40.com/ICK. All right, back to the show.
Oh, there's some elements to that I can really relate to, because in April, it will be 8 years ago, I came down with what I thought was a cold a couple of days after Easter. And 6 weeks later, it was like, okay, wait a minute, this isn't a cold. And then the next 2 years, it was, at the time, my office was the upstairs loft of my condo. So I would crawl upstairs, work for a couple hours, crawl downstairs, sit on the couch, and my husband would deliver dinner to my lap, and then I would go to bed. And the fatigue was incomprehensible, really. And that went on for about 2 years. I already knew I had an autoimmune thyroid issue, but I, 2 years later, got the diagnosis of Lyme disease, and then went in, full on treatment for Lyme disease. And honestly, 8 years later, I would say I'm 25% better, but I have had to completely reshape my life. And it's so funny because when the pandemic hit, Pat and I were like, okay, now everybody's going to live like we do, which is like at home, on the couch, watching Netflix, eating at home, making our own food. Like the pandemic for us was a bit of a breeze because we had been living that way for a couple of years already. But yeah, there were eras, definitely my 20s, I was running at the same level as you were. I always used to say burning the candle at both ends and then setting a firecracker off in the middle. Like, yeah, I can do everything. But still, I was pushing pretty hard and like, nope, that doesn't work anymore. You have to completely refashion your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can respect that.
Wow.
It's hard work. And it's more hard work mentally because you have to detach
Yes.
from,
That's the word. That's literally the word that's in my head right now. Is like the biggest lesson is detachment.
yeah, you have
And
to
it's such a
detach
hard
from
lesson to learn.
who you thought you were,
Yes.
what you thought you could do. And it's a very hard lesson to learn. And you're exactly right. The only way out is through. Because if you go around it, it will never let you go.
Nope.
You will never get out of it.
One of the best pieces of advice along the lines of the only way out is through was, problems or issues that you're ignoring will just keep getting bigger until they can no longer be ignored.
Oh, here's the way I say it. The universe will keep sending you the same challenge over and over again until you decide to address it.
Yep. That's it. That's it.
So tell me what it looks like a couple of weeks, a couple of months later. You're shifting your work, you're shifting away from dancing and into some of the healing arts work. You know you have to make a change in your life.
Mhm.
What does that phase look like?
Oh man. I was in so much grief that I was operating at partial capacity. There was definitely, again, like that sort of like adrenal burning stress of like, I got to make a living. I got to do this. I got to do that. At that point, I was very fortunate to own my apartment, and it was just like, okay, I need to make this mortgage payment come hell or high water. Like Chase does not care, like what's going on. Like Chase does not care that I just hurt my back. Like that money is going to be coming out of my account, whether it's there or not, And I think it just kind of felt like a moment of survival, doubling down and just really applying that same sort of like almost like acid like stress of the hustle into like, I have to find a job. I have to find a living. And I just started scrounging what I could that did not require me to be on stage. But also like my identity was so firmly on stage that I didn't want to be looking anywhere else. And talking about detachment also comes with like acceptance. Like I refused to accept that what was happening was going to be a forever thing. It was just like, well, no, this is unacceptable. I'm going to keep on keeping on. And before I know it, I'll be back on stage just the way I was. And it was like, no. And so, I was still producing. I would hire hosts so I wouldn't have to be on stage. But it was like they were my people, and everybody was like, "Where are you, Legs? Like we haven't seen you around." And yeah, I've been on the couch. And I didn't make a big stink of it. I didn't share with the world, I am convalescing on my couch. I was like, nope, I don't want anyone to know about this. This is not cool. But honestly, looking back on it, it was just a dark time. I mean, by that point, let's see, that was in 2015. So by that point, my now wife, we were already living together. So she was able to help me too. She was a bartender. And so she could work in these like horrible bars in Bushwick and bring home like hundreds of dollars a night. So it was like, cool. Like that's okay, cool. It was really touch and go for a long time. But I think I'm also somebody who I've always been an optimist. As depressed as I've been and as terrible as I've been to my body out of feelings of depression and frustration and loss of direction or just aimlessness, there's always been a little glimmer on the edge. It was also like that the back injury triggered a whole bunch of things happening. I mean, I got engaged. We got married in 2016. We ended up moving to Western Massachusetts, like at the drop of a hat, which was a total shock, only to move up to Maine then, in 2020. Looking back on it, I can't remember the minutia necessarily, but I just remember saying like, I have to keep pushing forward. There's something else. There's got to be something else. And I'm still here. So clearly like something happened. I can't remember what it was, but it was definitely a time that sort of both tested my faith, but also forced me to really dig down deep. And in some ways, like strip everything back to the brass tacks and be like, what am I doing? What I was able to uncover was like, I mean, I ended up stepping into entrepreneurship because it was like, it was easy. It felt easier to make money on my own terms than to get a job. What no one told me is that entrepreneurship is unbelievably hard, but it's also intense self-development.
Right.
And so I was going to these like online business classes and I had tears rolling down my cheeks. So I'm like, well, I don't believe in myself. Like, okay, well, you're going to reach out to 500 people. Like, I'm not reaching out to my broke ass friends to like go buy this product or support me in this new venture. And I was like, absolutely not. And I tried some things and like none of it, even looking back, I still feel like little tinges of shame because I did end up like, I got pulled into a multi-level marketing company. And I was like, oh, well, it's great. I totally got hook, line, and sinkered and did bring some friends in only to realize like, this is a con. This is terrible.
Yeah.
And, was able to see my way out. But even then, just constant self-doubt. And I was like, no, where I want to be is on stage. And I was like, your body's not letting that happen. And let's be honest, a barefoot burlesque dancer, unless you're like the most phenomenal barefoot burlesque dancer in the world, it's going to look like you're phoning it in and nobody's going to want to book you. No audience, nobody's going to pay $20 to see a show to see someone wandering around barefoot complaining about back pain. I mean, like that is the antithesis of sexy unless you got like a pain fetish.
Right.
So
So there's a couple of things I want to dig into. You were talking about at the beginning, you were saying how you had this feeling of your body being sort of pulled in multiple directions, doing what you wanted to do versus doing the things you should do. And then you found burlesque and you created this persona on stage that absolutely lit you up. So in that sense, you were really just doing everything that you wanted. Because there's nobody who's going to tell you should go and find a career as a burlesque dancer in New York City. So afterwards, talk to me a little bit about, and I can already see some of it because you're gonna go out on your own and start your own business, but you took those classes. I had a sales coach for a little while as well. And the way that he wanted me to do it was very icky and very not aligned with how I thought it would work for me. But he was an old white man and exceptionally successful and very rich. So of course he had the key, right? So tell me about at this point in time, at this juncture, you're moving forward from burlesque. Tell me about trusting yourself versus doing what you should.
Man, it was, if those are two poles, like I was dancing right in between them. And it took me a really long time to find my footing, for lack of a better term. I mean, so many stops and starts and so many failed opportunities, missed opportunities, failed endeavors. But again, I was like, that little glimmer on the edge was like, there's something more. There's something bigger and better waiting. You just have to find it. And so it's funny looking back on it. I mean, I remember saying my life got better overnight when I turned 30. And I remember saying, and people were always like, oh, the 20s. Oh my God, your 20s. And I remember saying to myself when I was in my 20s, I was like, anybody who gets through their 20s is rewarded by being in their 30s. And I was just like, that was my MO. Like I was super into it. But then I was like, oh, 40. I wonder. And there's so many burlesque dancers who are so much older than they look. I'll never forget, there was this one performer, she had turned 50. And she was a stone cold fox. I mean, this woman like breaking necks and hearts left, right, and center. And I remember being like, you're 50 years old? And she's like, I do what I love. That's what keeps me young. I remember being like, oh, wow. Oh, I want to do that when I'm 50. And so I feel like being in my 40s has been a real dance with truth. And I think it comes down to detachment, it comes down to acceptance. It also comes down to the fact of like, I've really come into deeper connection. I'm 47 now. Come into such deeper connection with the fact that like we are truly here for a good time, not a long time. I'm very fortunate to have an amazing chiropractor now, so it's like I can move. I'm building strength in my body. I'm finding more and more as watching all my friends go through menopause, be like, oh, actually strength training is essential to prevent osteoporosis. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And it's like, oh, right. Actually, I do need to take care of this. Like, I'm not going to forget the lessons that I learned in my 30s, certainly. But like watching everybody, like number one, what a privilege it is to get older. What a privilege it is to be able to celebrate one birthday after the other, and the responsibilities that come with that. True. One of my favorite sort of alternate definitions of the word responsibility is the ability to respond. And I feel like, again, slowing down, which was one of like my huge lessons that I learned, like literally coming into my 40th year, to slow down and to just focus what is right in front of me.
Yeah.
Like, forget the hustle, forget the like spinning my attention out in 40 million different directions. And it was, again, thanks to one of the many business trainings that I went to online and like books I read. One of the biggest takeaways from the book, it was two books in particular. One was Essentialism and the other was The One Thing. And The One Thing said it's better to grow 12 inches in one direction as opposed to 1 inch in 12 different directions. I remember being like, damn, like, number one, like I could just feel the realness of that statement, but also being like, how on earth am I only going to do one thing?
Right.
And like, spoiler alert, I still can't do just one thing.
Right. Right.
But at the same time, walking with that, the narrowing down and the slowing down has helped me realize how much I do have to work with, how many opportunities there are, how many conversations I get to have with brilliant people. I just feel like it's sort of shifted my perspective a little bit. And also the fact, like, it's real as hell watching your parents get old, like, and being like, oh, wow, like I'm very fortunate to still have both my parents. My dad's 79, my mom's 82. And it's like, wow, like if I want to live as long as that, there are changes I get to make now to promote my health, not just physically, but emotionally, find like in all senses of the term.
Yeah.
And again, even though that can sometimes be like, oh my God, how am I going to do that? Like, big breath, relax. Like, okay, we're all in this together by ourselves.
Right.
And what's the next step I can do? What's the
Right.
next one thing I can do? And I recognize that might not be the most satisfying answers, but it's like, I'm still figuring it out in a lot of ways. But I think I now have such a much clearer sense of who I am and what I want and what I'm wanting to create or achieve or experience, that in itself, I could not have gotten to that had it not been for every event that led me to where I am right now.
Absolutely. And it's unsexy, but it's sort of the key because it took you a long time to get there. But if we think about the last 7 years between your 40th birthday and where you are now, it sounds to me, if I were to extrapolate from your story, I would say that the journey, the process has been one of fine tuning. So you took the sales classes, you learned all the things you should be doing, you're supposed to be doing to grow a business. And then you read a book that one piece really struck you. And sure, maybe there was one or two things from those classes that resonated. And so the more you become confident in who you are and your own core, the more you can take only what you need and leave the shoulds to the side, right? And sure, you do it that way. I'm going to take this one thing you taught me and put it into my program. And now I'm creating my own way of living, of doing it, of running my business, of all of those things, of being.
Yeah. One of the best pieces of advice I got, I'm pretty sure I was in my 30s when I got it, which was replace the word should with could. And it changes everything. Because then everything becomes a possibility, a potential. Sure, I could go to grad school. Sure, I could climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Sure, I could fill in the blank. But then should I? No, should is judgment.
Yes.
And judgment is inherently, I don't want to say necessarily flawed, it is misaligned with the heart. Like judgment and justification go hand in hand. And when we step out of that paradigm and just begin to trust, hey, you know what? I am worthy of everything I'm going after. I have support, I have guidance, I have encouragement that I am giving to myself. Actually, those shoulds, they get to just fall away. And trust me, I know lots of people who I love dearly who use the word should constantly.
Yep.
And, like laughing with them, be like, please don't should all over me.
Right.
I'm not interested. I love you to the ends of the earth and back again, but like zip it with that should business. It doesn't apply to me. It just doesn't. You do you, I'll do me.
Yeah. The thing about shoulds, I think for the most part, the people who love us and who are telling us what we should be doing, And I always think of this like, say you're a teen or you're in 20s and your parents are telling you all the things you should be doing. It's because they want you to be happy, healthy, safe, secure. And based on their own experience, whether it's something they did or a choice they didn't make and saw the outcomes of both of those things, they're trying to share their expertise, their experience with you so that you can be maybe in a better position than they were. But your point is so important, is that it's not necessarily aligned with who I am, what I want, what my temperament is, what's going to work for me, all of these things. And so the shoulding I think a large part of it, the people who love us and are telling us what we should be doing, they're trying to help. And the problem is that when we're younger, we don't have that sense of self, that sense of confidence, that really strong core in who we are to say, no, I'm going to do it my way. And so we follow because, well, they must know better. They must know better than me. They're older, they're smarter, they're successful, they're right. They must know better than me. And it's at this period, you've come into it through your 40s, where you start to realize, oh no, I know better for me. I know better. And so I'm going to take the steps that make sense to me. And I'm not saying you would do it in a vacuum or in isolation. Of course, you're going to get information from all kinds of places. But having that confidence to make your own decisions and take your own steps and to discard all the advice. Just walk away from it. That's really what this part of life is about.
Amen to that. Yeah. My favorite antidote to judgment is discernment. We have the reflex to be like, what's meant to be close to me, what's not meant to be close to me. I think that's an evolutionary reality for all of us. We're the product of 4 billion years of evolution. Like, these reflexes have been honed over millennia by creatures we don't even know what they look like that are our distant ancestors.
Right.
So, or beings as well. And I think there's something to be said about judgment is so misaligned to sink down into discernment, which is simply the practice of figuring out what stays, what goes. Physiologically speaking, it's the job of the small intestine. Fun fact. It's
and
like what gets
closetly
absorbed
speaking, it's the job of Marie Kondo.
Exactly. Does this spark joy? No. Bye. But it again, because I still have a reflex to judge. It's the environment I was raised in. Like, say somebody walks into the coffee shop with a clown suit on, people are like, who's that old bozo?
Yeah.
And it's like, some people be like, oh my God, it's a clown. And other people be like, goodbye. Like, I hate clowns. And some people be like, ooh, what's their problem? Blah, blah, blah. Maybe that person's just like owning their love of clowns. But again, to the point being, discernment is an inherently neutral feeling. Instead of judgment, which is attacking value or assigning value, discernment is just like, what's right for me, what isn't right for me. I will let go of what doesn't need to be here, and I will receive what is meant to be here. And then I'll ask myself that same question tomorrow or a week from now or a month from now. It's sort of just like lowering the noise.
Yes.
And coming into the deeper question of like, what do I want to be doing, being, experiencing, achieving, all of that.
Yeah. So my last question for you is, when you were a kid and a young woman, you had that feeling of being pulled in multiple directions. You physically had it in your body, that feeling. Does that still exist today?
In flashes. And now when I experience that, I know something's out of whack. And so if it's like, I need to take a breath, or I need to drink a glass of water, or maybe I need to go for a walk, or maybe I need to just lean into having an uncomfortable conversation. Just feeling the edges of that, of the sort of body shimmers, because it does sometimes feel like shimmering up my body, not in the like fun, beautiful way, but like, hello, what am I feeling right now? I take it as my body as being a barometer, and it's telling me the truth, and I need to listen to it. My mind can spin a trillion different stories, but at the end of the day, my body is always going to tell the truth. My mind might take some narrative liberties, shall we say, but my body, all of our bodies, they always tell the truth. And so one of my favorite things to do to sort of bring myself back into alignment is just like sit down and take a few breaths and ask my body, like, what do you need right now?
Mm.
And if it's like you need to stretch your legs, you need to like literally uncurl your toes, like
Mhm.
just to even bring a little bit of lightness into the body
Yeah.
will immediately bring lightness to the mind. I am so grateful to have walked the sort of rocky, nasty parts of my path because I was able to find these tools and I can use them now. And that's really what I do in my work. I help people do this as well. So it's
Yeah.
like we don't have to be held up by our own anxiety or that this sort of split mindedness. Like, oh, I want to be an astronaut, but my dad says I should be an accountant. It's like, well, so what are you going to do with that?
Right.
And there's this beautiful term called sonder. And sonder is the word that refers to the fact that everybody has their own full, rich internal lives that is no different from anybody else. Sure, it'll be a completely different galaxy
Mhm.
compared to somebody else. But at the end of the day, like, and I think that was another big thing that I learned was just like, actually what works for me doesn't necessarily work for another person. And so
Right.
I'm a firstborn daughter. Like I'm real good at being bossy. And it's like,
Same,
oh,
same.
like all that stuff my brother would like push back on me and my friends would be like, Anna, you need to stop talking. Like you're being rude right now or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I don't think I was ever rude, but I definitely would not shut the F up sometimes. It was all like, oh wait, I can actually trust myself.
Yeah.
I can trust my body. I can trust that my body's telling me the truth. I can trust my heart. I can trust my mind. And where do we go from here? Because I think all of life is a constant becoming. And what's real and true for us now may not have been that 10 years ago, may not be 10 years from now. But it's just that sort of radical practice of being present.
Yeah.
And again, acceptance and detachment. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's also just to allow in gratitude, to allow in the acknowledgement of like, damn, I'm lucky. Even if stuff is hard, even if there's, a huge pile of credit card debt, even if, you don't know how you're going to pay your electric bill next month, like just to breathe in and be like, and I'm enough. It's
Yeah.
just money.
Right.
Like it can feel very real, but it doesn't affect your value as a human being.
Right. Your inherent value.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Anna, I love this so much, and I love you so much. And you and I are going to see each other this summer
Hell
at
yeah.
at your shows in Maine. I'm very much looking forward to that. But
Mm-hmm.
I think this is probably a good place to end this conversation, and then you and I will continue on in the real
Amen
world.
to that. Amen to that. Stephanie, this was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Oh,
You're such a delight, and this is so rich. It's such a beautiful moment of time. You're focusing the energy of this podcast on. I really want to acknowledge you for that. So
oh,
thank
thank
you.
you so much. It means a lot to me.
Thanks so much for listening today. I think Anna saved one of the very best bits for the end. She said, replace the word should with could, and it changes everything. Because then everything becomes a possibility, a potential, and it gets out of judgment. And this statement just so succinctly shoots straight to the heart of the midlife transition, detaching from external expectations and reclaiming your inner authority. That's one piece of advice from this conversation that I am going to add to my personal arsenal, and I hope you do too. As you go along your merry way, notice where shoulds show up in your self-talk and experiment with shifting to the word could. See how potential feels versus judgment. See how it feels to play with a possibility rather than to feel bad about something else you're not doing. And Anna also said her favorite antidote to judgment was discernment. And let me dig into that for just a minute so we're clear on the difference between them. Let's start with judgment. Judgment evaluates or condemns based on some external standard. It compares us to what's quote unquote right or wrong or good or bad. Judgment is often rooted in fear or comparison, and it easily carries that sense of shame or conversely superiority if you're the one dealing out the shoulds. And the word feels really emotionally charged. On the other hand, discernment analyzes and chooses based on internal alignment and truth. It's rooted in finding clarity, listening to intuition, and building self-trust. Discernment allows for nuance and growth and grace. And this word feels much more calm and grounded and intentional. Judgment says, you're doing it wrong. Discernment says, this isn't right for me. And that, again, is the heart of this midlife transition. Judgment keeps you stuck in comparison and shame, and discernment sets you free to make choices that are aligned with your personal, individual, unique truth. Which one of these words do you resonate with more? Which one feels better to you? I'm coming away from this conversation that discernment, not judgment, is the muscle that I need to build, and maybe you do as well. And I think this tiny language tweak is probably the beginning of some huge internal shifts. There's another deeper theme that I'm going to try to dig into before we meet again. I'm still working on fine-tuning it, but it's something around the danger of hustle culture and the power of slowing down. I've shared plenty of stories where someone's body made that decision for them, and I know that's part of my personal story, is that my body told me when it was time to slow down. So I'm going to go back and look at some of those conversations and see where there are overlaps or commonalities that I can explore, and see if I can't extract another piece of learning or wisdom that we can all learn from. So keep an eye out in your podcast feed for that. All right. In our next interview, you are going to meet Anne Montgomery, who worked as a sportscaster for 5 different TV stations. And then, when she was pushing 40, she was no longer considered pretty enough to be in front of a camera and had to pivot. Ouch. This is a harsh premise, but I promise you are going to love Anne. I can't wait to introduce her to you. So, I'll see you next time. The Big 4-0 podcast is produced and presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications.